Welcome back to my basement and chapter 4. Chapter 4 is about nonverbal communication. Paul Watzlawick said, "You cannot not communicate." He's a communication scholar that you may hear of more later on, probably in theory or something like that. But I don't want to go into a lot of detail on him. But I love the saying, "You cannot not communicate." Think about it. If you and your significant other had a spat and they are not talking to you at this moment in time, they're communicating. They're telling you, "I don't want to talk." From their look, from their body movements, you get the message. Culture is my favorite area of communication, but nonverbal has a special place. When I did my dissertation, I interviewed 13 couples. They were both sighted when they got together. Now one of them is blind. And I wanted to know what happened in the process. How did you stay together? How did you keep communicating? A lot of people get divorced after somebody gets disabled. And I wanted to know what they did right. I would have liked to have interviewed people that didn't stay together, but I couldn't find anybody willing to talk to me about that. And the few that did, and discussions that led up to it, were more blaming one or the other, and it was like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But one of the things that I looked at in my dissertation, as a couple, we have, and you have all probably experienced it if you've been in a romantic relationship, the look. The look that your significant other gives you, meaning, "Come here, baby, I want you," and "Stay the heck away from me, don't talk to me, I'm pissed right now." They don't say anything, but you can tell by the look. That's nonverbal communication. And most nonverbal communication is culturally dependent. Most of it's learned. Now, they have done a little bit of research in nonverbal communication with blind people, and they found out that blind people smile. People that have never seen anything still smile when they're happy. They still frown when they're sad. Those are a couple of the facial expressions, nonverbal expressions. They're not culturally dependent. They're not learned. There's something in our biology that makes us smile when we're happy and frown when we're sad. The book talks about how Darwin figured that out and did some paperwork on it and some research on it. But nonverbal communication has some functions. Some of it is intended. The look is intended. If you are married and you have a wedding band on, it's a nonverbal way to communicate to people that you are taken. It's intended. Some of it is unintentional. Some nonverbal communication, you don't mean to send a signal out, but you send one out. The book talks about the color of a room. I was recently at a doctor, and we were talking about being jaundiced. And she said the color they painted those rooms, the exam rooms, are supposed to have a calming effect on people. But she hates it because in that light, with that incandescent lighting and that color, she can't tell if somebody is jaundiced or not. She can't see the orange in their skin because of that color. Symbols are culturally dependent. We have a bunch of symbols, and the book talks about a few of them. But, like, okay, that does not mean okay in some countries. It means you're an asshole in some countries. So we develop these different symbols that we use, and they are culturally dependent on where you were raised. Sometimes a function of nonverbal communication is to send uncomfortable messages. Maybe you don't want to talk to somebody right now, and you keep looking at your watch, and I got to go, I got an appointment. So you look at your watch when they're talking to you, or you keep walking, and it lets them have the message that I don't have time to talk to you right now, without you having to say, "Look, I don't have time to talk to you right now." They are also for forming impressions. The first day of class, when we have an actual class that I walk in a suit. Why? Because I want to present a formal, professional appearance. Now, I'm 61 years old now. To me, that's how I should dress. When I give a presentation at a conference, I wear a suit. I recently went to a conference in Florida, and the dress code was resort casual. I had no clue what resort casual was, because when I go to conferences, I wear suits. I'm glad I didn't, and I found out what resort casual was. It was a shirt kind of like this, and shorts and flip-flops or sandals or something like that. Had I been wearing a suit, I'd have stuck out like a sore thumb. So you want to form impressions. When you go to meet your significant other's parents for the first time, I'm sure most of you do not wear the garb that you would wear when you're out with your friends, because you want to impress them. It's for clarifying relationships. And when I first started reading this particular portion of the chapter, to me, my mind immediately went relationship, husband-wife type deal. But that's not what they're talking about. Bosses have more power. So subordinates tend to, they give way to the boss. When I was in the Army, I saluted those superior to me, because that was showing respect to their rank. Oftentimes we say sir or ma'am or yes, or, and you stand up straighter and that type of stuff. Regulate interaction. More often than not, we can carry on a conversation with anybody, and we know when it's our turn to talk. And a lot of that is done through visual nonverbal cues. But have you ever had a conversation with a blind person that's never seen anything? They know when it's their turn to talk and when it's their turn to listen, strictly by listening to the nonverbal cues. Nobody says, okay, it's your turn. They stop, there's a pause, and somebody else starts. Reinforcing the verbal message. Shaking your head. Yes, got it. Thumbs up, I got it. Those reinforce the verbal message. There's different types of nonverbal communication. Proxemics is about space, proximity. Here in the United States, and it's culturally dependent. I believe in another video I mentioned that when I was in Europe, when I went to McDonald's, people would sit at your table if there was an empty chair there. Of course, they'd be polite and say, "Is this free?" But in the United States, that doesn't happen. You don't sit down at somebody else's table. If the restaurant is all the tables are taken, and you're at McDonald's, you stand there with your tray till a chair opens up, a table opens up, and you might be the only person, but you go sit at that table. How much space do we allow people to get near us? Elevators. In some countries, in Arabic countries, a lot of people stand next to you on the elevator if you're the only two there. But in the U.S., we don't do that. Something else that I tell my students about an elevator: if you are getting on a crowded elevator and you're the last one on, everybody gets on the elevator and turns around and faces the door. Keep facing everybody. It drives them crazy. You are invading their space because you aren't following the rules. You aren't turning around facing the door like everybody else is. You're looking at them, and it makes people uneasy. Territoriality. This is mine. You ever notice when a semester starts and we're in class and we have classrooms, that people walk in and they get them a seat, usually the first day, and this is their seat. This is my seat. And if after 2-3 weeks of class, somebody else comes in and sits in their seat, it's kind of like, that's my seat. You can't sit in my seat. That's my seat. When I was in grad school, I would sit in the same spot every day, and I would sit every class. I sat in the same spot at the same table, because we had a big table. In every class, I sat in the same spot. One of my friends would sit on one side of me in one class and another side of me in another class, and he would base his recollection of notes on where I was sitting, so he could keep the different classes straight. Kinesics is body language. What do we do? How do we do it? How do we move? And that aspect of it, what is are you nodding your head? Are you waving your arms? When communication classes first started centuries ago before my time, the one university had a big ball you would stand in. And when you were serious, it was like this. And when you were thoughtful, it was like that. You had actually places you pointed your hands and you stood in certain ways to express certain things. We don't do that anymore, but kinesics is a big thing of communication. You ever talk to somebody like this? When they're like that, it's like, they're standing, they're not open to you. They don't want to talk to you. How are they doing? I believe I mentioned this to you. I may not have. I was sitting on the porch. My wife was talking to me. I was staring at my phone. So instead of paying attention to her, I was looking at my phone. That was rude. So now I look at her and talk to her. Chromex. And I've heard that pronounced 20 different ways. I'm going to say Chromex. Chronix is time. How do we deal with time? Different cultures look at time differently. When I was in Peru at a conference, I talked to a person and said, we're up late one night having some drinks at a bar. I said, okay, we're going to talk together first thing in the morning. Okay. Well, I'm an old soldier. First thing in the morning, I got up at about 4 o'clock. I went and ran, went to the gym and worked out, got back, got a shower, got breakfast. By 7 o'clock, it was like, okay, where's he at? About 10 o'clock, he showed up. Well, in Latin America, tomorrow means tomorrow. It doesn't mean, like any certain time. Mañana, in the morning, whatever, it was like whenever he got around to it. He didn't have the same mindset I did for time. Paralanguage is how do we use your voice? In class, I've got a big mouth, and I generally am loud. But if something is important in class when I'm talking and lecturing, I'll generally lower my voice and start talking softer. Some of your professors talk soft all the time, and when something's important, they want to raise their voice, so you pay attention to it. Now, how fast are you talking? How slow are you talking? That is paralanguage. Silence. Some people say silence is golden. Other people say it's terrifying. How do you handle silence? Different cultures handle it differently. It's expected in many cultures. And a lot of times people are, in America anyway, are unnerved because it's quiet. Today we were riding to Columbus, my wife, my daughter, and I was riding, my wife was driving. And my wife said, don't everybody talk at once, because the silence was bothering her. So how do you handle silence? Sometimes it's important. The book talks of a Native American tradition where they mention the name of something and then they're quiet. And they do that because it deserves that much reverence. I talked about this, now think about it. Other places, people don't like silence. Haptics is touch. Touch is probably one of our first forms of communication. When you're a little bitty baby and you're crying, somebody picks you up. And you feel the comfort, the warmth, the touch. They're holding you. When the Soviet Union fell, some people went into an orphanage, and there was one person taking care of 60 babies. And they walked into the room with 60 cribs and 60 babies, and it was dead silent. And they were awestruck that it was so quiet. Well, the children had learned, they would cry, I'm wet, I'm hungry. And somebody normally picks them up. Well, in that case where one person is dealing with 60, she went from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, 11. Went down the line. Changing, feeding. They quit crying because nobody was coming. Nobody was touching them. And they've also found some psychological problems in people that aren't touched, the babies that weren't touched. Touch is also something that years ago, I'm talking ancient years ago when I was in elementary school, the teacher would come up and touch you on the shoulder. Vern, would you go up there and do that problem on the board? And it made a connection. Now teachers are told don't touch your students because they don't want any false feelings or feelings of accosting or anything like that going on. A lot of waiters and waitresses, when they seat you, will touch you on the shoulder because it makes a connection. And there's been a study that actually they got bigger tips because of the connection than waiters and waitresses that didn't touch. Artifactual communication. Artifacts are things around you. You know, right now you see my cluttered office with my refrigerator back there and things like that. But how do you decorate your space? What do you wear? Do you wear a lot of gold jewelry? I believe I mentioned to you about me once having a rebel flag and it bothered a black soldier friend of mine, and I took it down because I found out it bothered him. How do you decorate? How do you decorate yourself? When I grew up in Texas, I knew an old farmer. He wore coveralls and old boots. He drove a tractor. He was complaining one day because his tractor broke down. He had to buy a new one, and the only ones they had air conditioner, and he didn't need no air conditioning. He had a Rolex watch. He was filthy rich. But other than that watch, you'd never know. Some people wear a cross to represent that they're Christian. Some people wear a Star of David to represent that they're Jewish. What type of jewelry do you wear, and what story does it tell? Olfactics. Yeah, I love all these words. Olfactics are about smell. Smell is one of the most powerful senses that we have, and it's a wonderful form of communication in many ways. When you go home to your parents for the holidays and you smell that wonderful aroma coming from the kitchen because it's that special time of the year meal, it brings back memories. When you get up in the morning and you smell coffee, if you're a coffee drinker like I am, it's like, oh yeah, coffee, good, I'm happy. It allows us to communicate a lot of things, and it's very powerful. Have you ever wondered why Walmart, Target, Winn-Dixie have their bakeries up front? Because when you walk in, if you're not hungry, they want you to be. Because if you're hungry, when you shop, you buy more. So why is the milk all the way at the back of the store? Because some people have to have milk and they will walk all the way to the back to get it. And they have to come all the way back through the other signs and symbols that are nonverbal communication, trying to get them to buy stuff. And the whole time you smell that fresh baked bread or that fresh pie or that fried chicken that's in the deli and the bakery up front, causing you to buy stuff. Nonverbal communication. And different cultures teach us different things. My daughter was a student, and she was getting a class from a guy that was like 2 years older than her. And she said, yes, sir. And he said, don't call me sir. She said, as long as my dad's standing there, I will. Because when she was raised, that's what we taught her. The book talks about why a Thailand tradition or they use, where they put the palms together in bidding hello and bidding goodbye. And even little infants, they do that because they teach them from a very young age, this is what you do. This is nonverbal. We don't say it, but this is it. The text also talks about a high context Korean presidential meeting. When the presidents of North and South Korea met in the DMZ, it was the first time that the two had met there, And they had all kinds of nonverbal things. They had an oval table that was a certain size because of that was the year. And they planted a tree together. It was all meaning different things. And the president of South Korea gave the president of North Korea a blue tie because blue was their color of their unification flag. So it was all very high context, which we talked about last chapter. Nonverbal misinterpretations. Remember earlier I told you that symbols were culturally dependent in nonverbal communication. Peace. Y'all know what that means, right? Peace. Well, in many countries that are English from, derivative of England, this means the same thing as this. So President George Bush was in Australia, and there was a peace demonstration, and his motorcade went by, and he said, peace, but he didn't say peace, he said peace. And that pissed off a bunch of people. It was a miscommunication. That's not in your textbook. Another thing that happened with similar hand signals is one day my wife and son and I drove up to a Subway. We were getting out of the truck, and some kid inside Subway was going, and I was going, excuse me? And my son said, oh, Dad, that's my friend. He's saying hi. I said, well, tell him he needs to learn how to say hi differently when your parents are around. Because I definitely misinterpreted his greeting. The military use of symbols, they were saying in Afghanistan, they made some leaflets. A lot of people there are illiterate, so they use symbols on the leaflets to describe how we want you to help us get the bad guys. Bad guys were a dog, a white dog because their flag was white, and the good guys were lions, and their flag had a symbol on there that was very respected by most Muslims because it was a Muslim symbol. It wasn't an Al-Qaeda symbol, and the leaflet, the way it was printed, made it look like we hate all Muslims. And one last thing, how many of you have heard of a car called a Nova, a Chevy Nova? Well, a lot of times people thought Chevy Novas were great. That's muscle car type deal, da-da-da-da. Well, back when they first came out, Chevy thought they were so great, they tried to sell the car in Mexico as well. But it wouldn't sell because the name Nova basically meant no go. So it was a verbal or non-verbal because the picture, the name was written on the car. It was a symbol. That symbol, those characters, that word, the people didn't want to buy a car that wouldn't go. Nonverbal communication. The text was a pretty good chapter. I enjoyed reading it. I hope you did. Learn a few things. Nonverbal is such a wonderful way to communicate. And a lot of times we actually mess up our communication because we misinterpret the nonverbal signals. So watch what you're presuming somebody says, because especially if you're in another country, you have to understand that it's culturally dependent. I have been looking for a video. My internet is very spotty recently. And if I find it, I will post it. But I will tell you about it real quick. This girl is licking an ice cream cone. And all these guys are looking at her and smiling and thinking that she is like insinuating something with him. And then she finishes the ice cream cone. She reaches down, grabs a white cane, unfolds it, puts her sunglasses on, and walks off. She's blind. But the interpretation they got, the signals that they thought, were the wrong ones. So be careful when you interpret somebody's nonverbal communication. Thanks a lot. Call me if you need me. Email me if you need me. I hope this helps, and I look forward to reading your conversations. Have a good day.